Can you give me a brief summary of what your project was on?
Oh yes, of course I can. My project was a brief summary of the history of West Coast rap, how it was influential, and what it means to rappers across the world, or as well as poor African American communities.
My project was on what I did was I looked at and researched comedians that I liked as well as I knew general population liked, such as Kevin Hart, Louis C.K., Will Ferrell, Chris Rock, just a bunch of people. And I looked at like where do they get their material from because I never really thought about it or even like if it was hard. I always thought like it was pretty easy to be a comedian. But after like doing research and whatnot, like I figured out that material comes from personal life, observations, like social observations, theories. Just like there's many different ways that comedians get their material, and I found it very fascinating to be able to research these people by watching their stand-ups, watching interviews, reading their books, even. So
Yeah.
that was my material.
Did you have any other ideas for your thesis? If so, what were they, and why did you end up choosing the one you did?
I only had two ideas for my senior thesis. One idea was, of course, the history of West Coast rap and how it was influential. The second thesis I was mulling over was esports, video game sports. But then I realized that's lame.
Yeah. When I was choosing my thesis, I was hesitant because the other one was I like hockey, so I was gonna like self teach myself how to ice skate, or I was gonna do this one, but like make a funny video compilation with someone teaching me how to ice skate. But I figured that would be really time consuming and kind of unrealistic because like I'd have to pay to go do the ice skating like
Yeah.
rink and go for like instead of sitting on my couch and watching Netflix to like research research my topic.
What type of elimination process went through your head when you were trying to figure out a topic?
I thought of what senior thesis would people most enjoy watching? Which one is more influential and has the most impact on people's heads and their souls? And I thought about that for a bit, and I realized West Coast rap is more than just that. It's also a very race based issue. So, in the end, I decided on that.
Um, I didn't have one. I went up to my teacher, Miss Baldoni, and I was like, "Hey, which of these two topics do you think will probably be easier to do as well as more interesting to do?" And then I told her both topics, and she was like, "I like this one better." And she was like, "It's obviously your choice, but like I think this one would be more interesting and more fun for you to do." So I kind of took that, and I went home, and that's where my actual process began. And I was like, working out the pros and cons of each of them. And I think at the end of the day, I made the right choice because I had a fun time doing my project.
Why did you choose the book you read?
There were not many books based on the creation of West Coast rap or rap
Mm-hmm.
in whole. One other book that I thought of was the Rap Yearbook, which says every influential rap song in the last, I don't know, 30 years and
Mm-hmm.
explains why each one was influential. But I decided in the end that the book that I chose had more impact and followed the storyline of the creation of rap
I
better.
was doing research on my books, and I was just like, hey, like, originally I thought instead of just doing like stand-up comedy, or instead of doing like both stand-up comedy and like comedy sketches and like shows and whatnot,
Yeah.
I thought I was only gonna do stand-up comedy. So the book I chose was stand-up comedy, the book, and essentially it was just like it was more of like a tips book on how to get your material rather than like where do they get their material. But yeah, I just chose it because I thought it was a good read at the time. It ended up being okay, I guess.
How did you go about researching or finding your information for the project?
Aside from the book that I chose, I also researched online. There was this great website that I found about the history of West Coast rap and each individual rapper. It went way more in depth than my presentation could, but due to time I was limited. And another thing that I used was my friend picked up a copy of the Rap Yearbook. So I breezed through that, not too long, to went through it, looked at it all, and I think it gave me a great understanding.
Mm-hmm.
So with mine, I had comedians. So what I did was I went on Netflix and I went on TV and I went on the internet and I essentially just researched like their stand-up shows, the movies they were in, the books they wrote and whatnot, and I watched them all, or some of them at least, and I read pieces of their books, and I essentially just came up with like how like they got their material based off of
Mm-hmm.
what they were in.
If you were to do this project over, what would you change about it and why?
Hmm, it's a very interesting question. What would I change about my project? I thought that my project was stellar, but maybe it ran on too long. I don't know. It seemed that some people in the class, as I was presenting, of course, were not too enticed. They weren't captured as I hoped them to be. They were fading away.
Thank you for your time. This was very interesting.
Of course, it was a pleasure.
If you were to do this project over, what would you change about it and why?
I was pretty happy and comfortable with the outcome I had. I don't think I'd honestly change anything other than like maybe being able to show different skits from each of my comedians' performances, because the comedians that I did were pretty vulgar, but in order to convey like their performances, I thought that I needed to show the vulgarity in their performances. Um, so if anything, I would have liked to have been able to show a little bit more of that. But I mean, with political correctness now and all that fun stuff, it's kind of hard to. So I'm not allowed to. But um, other than that, I may have changed the book I read because I don't think it was informative enough to what my project was on, and everything else was pretty good and pretty fun to do. So literally, I was watching comedians do their performances, so it was pretty funny to me.
That's pretty easy.
Yeah, it was pretty easy, but it was really fun, and I had a good time with it, and yeah.
Thank you for having me today. My name's Sam Pedalino. Here's my outro dunk.
You're so good. Can you give me a brief summary of what your project was on?
I was losing it.
Can you give me a brief summary of what your project was on? Can you give me a brief summary of what your project was on?
Oh yes, of course I can. My project was on the history of West Coast rap.
I'm not gonna record you when you're eating, don't worry.
Well, it was pretty funny. I got a few laughs in there. I wish you saw it though. It was funny.
I should have came.
You should have. What period? The third period.
Really?
Okay, I'm good. I'm being interviewed right now for my friend's senior thesis. I have no idea where Gail is. Hold on, I'm gonna burp again.
You can...
No, I'm not. Wait. Okay, I'm good. Should be good.